Hey heroes, and welcome to another diabolical episode of History of the Marvel Universe. This channel is sponsored in part by Patreon supporters. If you would like to contribute and vote in monthly polls that help decide what topics get covered on the channel, then you can sign up for an amount of your choosing over at patreon.com/MaryMarvelate. The link is in the description below, along with other places you can find me. This week's tale begins eons ago in the Faltine dimension, a layer of reality in which there was no physical matter, just various forms of energy. This included the vastly powerful entities from whom the dimension itself was named. Over countless millennia, the Faltine absorbed different forms of energy into their bodies, often feuding with each other over tiny variations in quantity and type. However, certain combinations allowed individual Faltine to reproduce in a sense. Normally, a Faltine child, or scion as they were called, was a smaller duplicate of their parent, and remained fiercely loyal to the genitor that spawned them. As such, each Faltine genitor sought to produce as many scions as possible, to increase the size of their clan. However, there was one Faltine by the name of Cinnifer who observed other races and, inspired by their vagaries, performed the unprecedented act of producing two unique offspring, Umar and Dormammu. Despite existing in a universe of pure energy, these two siblings lusted for matter, a desire that was seen as the greatest taboo possible. Even Cinnifer was appalled by this perversion and attempted to stand against them, but Dormammu and Umar murdered their own genitor by transmuting him into dark, dead matter. This unthinkable crime was so horrifying, the other Faltine put aside their feuds and united to drive the two siblings out of their dimension. However, this supposed punishment would prove to be a boon for Umar and Dormammu, for upon reaching the lower planes of reality, they found more than enough physical matter to consume and absorb, satisfying their illicit desires. Using this matter, they permanently transformed from entities of pure energy into humanoid physical beings. They decided that the reality which best suited their purposes was a plane called the Dark Dimension, one of the Splinter Realms that make up the archipelago of anguish and redemption. You see, the Splinter Realms are named as thus because they were once a single enormous plane of existence that was shattered into chaotic realms where the laws of physics and gravity as we know them don't always apply, and even time itself can flow in different ways. Notable examples of Splinter Realms include the Winding Way, the Dream Dimension, which includes Nightmare's world, and the hellish Limbo Dimension, aka Other Place. Many of Earth's underworlds and hells are also either connected to or part of the Splinter Realms. In any event, when the original colossal dimension was splintered into these individual realms, the largest chunk became known as the Dark Dimension. Filled with magical energy and containing a myriad of strange twists in reality, this plane of existence was home to many different species. Among them arose individuals who learned to channel the Dark Dimension's energy into a mystic flame, creating light and stabilizing gravity. These practitioners of the mystic arts became known as Muruks, a term which roughly translates to wizard. As ages passed, the Muruks worked to impose order amid the chaos of the Dark Dimension, allowing civilization to develop. This was not without conflict and infighting, mind you, as numerous wars were fought in the name of peace. Eventually, however, alliances were forged and many were united under the rule of Guran the Great, who established the Azure throne of the Guranthic Empire. He also erected a large stone statue called the Guranthic Guardian, which could come to life to defend the realm. While more conflicts arose over subsequent generations, eventually Guran's descendant, Okaan, successfully established a lasting peace among the Muruks, uniting the Dark Dimension into a peaceful society. That peace lasted for nearly 28 great cycles, each one roughly equating to 1,000 years by our timescale, until Dormammu and Umar arrived in the 3rd millennia in the reign of the Wizard King Ulnar. Ulnar accepted the siblings into his realm as refugees, and in exchange, Dormammu and Umar offered to show him how to break down the walls between realities and absorb other planes into his own. The other Muruk warned him against trusting the two strangers, but Ulnar was intrigued by their promise to expand his domain. Thus, the three worked over the following decades to annex other Splinter Realms, further increasing the size and influence of the Dark Dimension. That was until they absorbed a neighboring pocket dimension containing an army of savage, unfeeling creatures aptly named the Mindless Ones. These unnatural entities were created by a Duke of Hell named Plokta, using numerous worlds as factories. Nigh indestructible and immune to exhaustion, the Mindless Ones flooded the Dark Dimension, devastating everything in their path and killing King Ulnar, who was the first of many victims. Dormammu and Umar narrowly survived, but found that many Muruks blamed them for the tragedy that had befallen their realm. Although outnumbered, the Faltine siblings struck quickly and decisively, exterminating many of the Muruks before a proper attack could be mounted against them. With no time to rest, the two siblings turned their attention back to the Mindless Ones and worked together to erect a mystic barrier, sealing the unyielding invaders behind it. In the end, they saved the remaining denizens of the Dark Dimension, but Umar had overtaxed her physical body, leaving her powers weakened. While she would eventually recover, Dormammu was able to use this time to assume the throne, having earned the support of many citizens, while Ulnar's heir, Orini, was merely an infant. At his coronation, Dormammu merged his essence with the mystical energy of the Dark Dimension itself, declaring that the flames of regency would appear upon the heads of those meant to rule. As such, he abandoned his human visage by partially reverting back to his fiery Faltinian form and becoming a being of living, mystical energy. While the remaining Muruk wizards refused to support him, Dormammu cast upon them a spell of silence and sent them out to wander the Dark Dimension as outcasts. Umar, meanwhile, was pleased with her humanoid appearance and decided to remain in that form, and for a time she ruled beside her brother. Together, the two made pacts and treaties with other dimensional rulers like Kaza of the Rodan dimension and Odin of Asgard. Dormammu also defeated those who became their enemies and even joined forces with the cosmic abstract Eternity to banish the powerful, life-destroying demon Zam. Meanwhile, Orini, the son of the previous king, was raised as a ward of Dormammu, eventually becoming his closest disciple. After reaching adulthood, he caught the attention of Umar, who found him attractive and wished to further explore her own humanoid body. Umar seduced Orini, who was drawn in by her ageless beauty, and the two made love. However, Umar found the act utterly disgusting and ran off soon after it was done. Nonetheless, this soul encounter had left her pregnant, and 6 lesser cycles later, she gave birth not to a Faltine scion, but a flesh and blood daughter. This act of childbirth traumatized Umar, leaving her unbalanced. She abandoned the baby with its father, Orini, who named her Clea and thanklessly raised her alone. Umar also attempted to revert to her Faltine form, but found that she could not, and grew bitter and violent, going so far as to challenge her brother, Dormammu. However, Umar was still weakened from her battle with the Mindless Ones, and upon being defeated, was banished to one of the Dark Dimension's many pocket universes. In the wake of this, Orini took her place as Dormammu's second, and Clea grew up worshipping them both, unaware of who her mother was. With the Dark Dimension under his uncontested control, Dormammu set his sights on conquest, and took notice of a material plane that he quickly grew to covet, the Earth Dimension. He apparently first began observing the Earth itself back in its ancient prehistory, during a time when the planet was overrun with demonic elder gods. Those evil entities were opposed by Atum, the son of the benevolent elder goddess Gaia, who slew the demons, absorbing their energies into himself, which transformed Atum into the misshapen Demogorge, the God Eater. When his task was complete and the demonic elder gods were destroyed, save for Cthon and Set, who fled to other dimensions, the Demogorge cast off the divine energy he'd absorbed, becoming Atum once again and merging with the sun. But from that discarded god stuff arose a new type of demon shaped by the unconscious desires of early humans. Chief among them were beings like Mephisto and Marduk Kurios, who took up residence in their own hellish dimensions among the Splinter Realms and became collectively known as the Hell Lords. However, one of these demons, Satanish, was effectively created by Dormammu, who guided his development so that he would have an agent to secretly watch the other Hell Lords. Dormammu went on to observe the Earth for thousands of years, and his schemes were often opposed by the Earth Dimension's first Sorcerer Supreme, Agamotto. While Agamotto and his successors prevented the Dark Dimension from assimilating the Earth, they were unable to definitively defeat Dormammu, and the Dread One's infamous reputation grew among human sorcerers. In 1666, Dormammu started a great fire in London, England, and used the life force of those who perished to link the two dimensions. This was sensed by the Tibetan mystic Yao, who had recently earned the mantle of a Sorcerer Supreme. Confronting Dormammu at Stonehenge, where the dimensions were bridged, Yao successfully pushed the Dread One back and erected mystical barriers that prevented his return. Others who opposed Dormammu included Hiram Shah, an exorcist and prospective Sorcerer Supreme from Salem, who was pulled into the Dark Dimension in 1692. However, Hiram was no match for Dormammu on his home turf, and the Dread One simply taunted Shah with images of his family legacy before banishing him back to Earth. Despite being barred from entering the Earth Dimension himself, over the following centuries Dormammu occasionally acted through other agents. In 1888, he sent a cluster of mystical parasites from the Dark Dimension to Earth, where it infected a misanthropic man named Tom Malvern, who suffered from a terrible case of kyphosis. The parasite exacerbated Malvern's negative emotions, and when he witnessed a vampire stalk and kill a man on the streets of London, he followed the creature back to its coven, hoping to become one of them. The head of the coven could tell that Malvern was not born with a thirst for blood, and declared that if he proved himself by killing a human and drinking their blood before the end of the year, he would turn him. Malvern agreed and set out on his grisly task, during which time the mystical parasite transformed his body, making him stronger and deadlier. In the latter half of 1888, he killed as many as 9 women in Whitechapel, 5 of which were found horribly butchered, earning him the infamous alias Jack the Ripper. Despite the parasites spurring on his brutality, Malvern found himself unable to drink the blood of his victims, and so at the end of the year, Malvern was killed by the Vampire Coven, while the Ripper's true identity remained an unsolved mystery to the police and the public. The vampires buried him beneath a lopsided tombstone marked Jack the Ripper, and Malvern's restless ghost rose from his grave to kill any who attempted to investigate. Meanwhile, the parasites survived, and over the following decades occasionally possessed others, infecting them with the Ripper persona. Notable among their hosts was Brad Wolfe, an actor from Chicago who was set to play a fictional slasher called the Zaniac, but was exposed to radiation and transformed into an actual superhuman killer. Because of that incident, the name Zaniac has also been used to refer to the Ripper parasites themselves, notably after Wolfe was killed and the parasites exploded from his body. But back to the story at hand, in 1939, Yao, who by this point was known simply as the Ancient One, took on an apprentice named Baron Karl Amadeus Mordo. While Mordo had dark ambitions, the Ancient One hoped to keep an eye on him and curb his evil tendencies. However, in 1943, Mordo offered his own mother and grandfather as a blood sacrifice to Dormammu. The Dread One accepted Mordo as his disciple and used him as an agent through which he could enact his will. The following year, in 1944, the notorious Nazi known as the Red Skull inadvertently traveled to the Dark Dimension after his agents stole a mystical amulet called the Eye of Agamotto from the Ancient One. Dormammu wanted the eye for himself, but the skull was followed by his enemies, Captain America and Bucky, who stole it back. Furthermore, the Ancient One sent Sergeant Nick Fury and his Howling Commandos to aid the two heroes, and together they ultimately escaped back to Earth with the amulet. Over the following years, Dormammu and Mordo conspired to slowly weaken the Ancient One's power. However, in 1963, Yao began training his true successor, Dr. Stephen Strange, who regularly opposed Mordo. Eventually, Mordo left the Ancient One's temple and continued to provide Dormammu with human sacrifices over the years. Early in the Marvel Age of Heroes, Mordo sought the patronage of another entity called the Great Enigma, and clashed with Doctor Strange and Spider-Man. Ironically, when Mordo finally came face to face with the Great Enigma, he found that this was just another name that had been ascribed to Dormammu. Weary of Mordo's failures, Dormammu cast his disciple back to Earth and prepared to take matters into his own hands. With the Ancient One's powers finally faltering, the Dread One sent a ghostly messenger to announce his inevitable return to Earth. To get ahead of this threat, Yao sent Strange into the Dark Dimension to confront Dormammu. There, Strange faced a number of trials and threats, including a test of will from the ancient Guranthic Guardian. His courage and capabilities soon caught the attention of Umar's daughter, Clea, who found herself attracted to the extra-dimensional invader. Fearing that he might actually defeat Dormammu, Clea explained to Strange that his power was the only thing protecting the denizens of the Dark Dimension from the rampaging Mindless ones. Despite the fact that she was trying to convince Strange not to fight, Dormammu imprisoned Clea for speaking with the enemy. Of course, the whole situation culminated in a battle between the dread Dormammu and Doctor Strange. While unable to overpower his opponent, Strange was able to hold his own long enough for Dormammu to inadvertently weaken the mystic barrier as he tapped into the energies around him. Dormammu was unable to push the Mindless ones back alone, but Strange came to his aid, energizing the Dread One with his own amulet and re-establishing the barrier. Begrudgingly in the human's debt, Dormammu agreed to free Clea and renounce his conquest of Earth. This deal prevented him from trying to invade the planet and began a long-standing enmity with Strange that eclipsed all others. Seeking vengeance, Dormammu was once again forced to act through intermediaries and granted Mordo more power than he'd ever had before. Over the following weeks, Mordo and his minions hunted Strange, menacing him across the globe. Eventually, they succeeded in capturing the Ancient One and luring Strange into a direct confrontation. However, Dormammu grew impatient with Mordo's inability to defeat Strange and pulled all of them into a neutral dimension along with the rulers of various neighboring netherworlds. Once there, Dormammu challenged Strange to single combat, in which each one would be armed with a pair of enchanted pincers and would have access to no other weapons or spells. With the playing field leveled, the two were fairly evenly matched, but then Mordo interfered in the battle, attempting to help his master by striking Strange down from behind. Enraged by this affront to his honor, Dormammu renounced Mordo and banished him to a dimension of demons. Doctor Strange then declared himself well enough to continue the battle, and with both barred from using their magic, Dormammu was ultimately defeated. With the other netherworld rulers having witnessed this, Dormammu was forced to swear not to use his power against the Earth. Of course, his hatred of Strange only grew when he continued to plot his revenge. He began by souring Strange's victory, accusing Clea of treason for helping Strange, and banishing her to another dimension. He later attempted to erect a barrier that confined the embodiment of eternity, obscuring his misdeeds so that he could challenge Strange to another battle. However, that scheme failed when eternity proved too powerful to contain, and the cosmic abstract banished Dormammu to the enigmatic realm unknown. There, he was beset by demonic creatures called Dicors, but the Dread One ultimately defeated and replaced their masters. Meanwhile, with Dormammu gone and his spells weakened, Strange was able to retrieve those the Dread One had banished, including Clea. Although that also meant restoring Baron Mordo, and the two continued their rivalry. And of course, Dormammu's sister Umar was finally able to return to the Dark Dimension, where she claimed the throne and took her brother's place in holding back the Mindless ones. She also divined what she'd missed in her absence, including her brother's enmity with Doctor Strange. And not bound by Dormammu's agreements, she sought to destroy him herself. Learning of his affinity for Clea, Umar decided to use her own daughter as bait, luring Strange into the territory of the Mindless ones. While Strange survived and escaped, to prevent Umar from slaying Clea in response, he was forced to allow the Ancient One to hide her in an unknown plane of existence. When Umar then attempted to invade the Earth, Strange and the Ancient One repelled her by unleashing Dormammu's ancient enemy, Zam. Meanwhile, Clea ironically landed in the Realm Unknown, the same place that Dormammu had been banished to. After capturing Clea, Dormammu summoned his sister Umar, and the two joined forces once again, albeit with more hesitance and distrust than before. Clea was ultimately rescued by Doctor Strange and his ally Victoria Bentley, who traveled to the Realm Unknown to find her. While Doctor Strange once again battled the dread Dormammu, Clea and Victoria returned to Earth and used their combined power, along with the mystical orb of Agamotto, to mentally influence Umar into aiding Strange by breaking the magical chains that her brother had bound him with. In this battle, Dormammu attempted to pass through a gateway to Earth and personally lead a Dicor invasion, but soon found that his own oath prevented him from doing so, weakening him enough to be forced back by Doctor Strange. In the wake of that conflict, Clea decided to remain on Earth for a time and stayed by Strange's side. Dormammu, of course, returned to the Dark Dimension and reasserted control over that realm. He continued to plot and scheme, seeking ways to circumvent his agreements to seize control of Earth and finally defeat Doctor Strange, putting him into conflict with other Earthborn heroes, including eclectic groups of defenders assembled by Strange. But if you're interested in some of those tales, then you'll have to let me know in the comments, because that is all the time I have for you this week. And so let me say thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share it on your favorite social media. As always, the issues referenced in this video are listed in the description below if you would like to read them for yourself, as well as links to other places you can find me. Let me give a special shout out to all of my Patreon and Ko-fi supporters, Twitch subscribers, and YouTube members who help make the channel possible. By signing up for any ongoing amount on any of these platforms, you'll get your name in these special thanks, but Patreon is the one that helps determine what topics get covered on the channel via monthly polls. That being said, if there is anything in particular that you want me to talk about, be sure to let me know in the comments. But that is indeed all I have for you this week, and so until next time, true believers, Excelsior!